All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here for our NCL Fall 2024 chat with the game creators. With us today, we have Tristan Messner. Oh, this is mirrored. Tristan Messner. Connor. Oh, man, this is just really confusing me here. Connor Moaning from our engineering team. And below me, we have Dylan Watson from CrowdStrike. And I am Franz Pear. And today, we're going to go through some of the questions that you have from the games, and also to go through kind of like some of our thought process behind maybe how we created some of the challenges, and also to get Dylan's insights here since he works for CrowdStrike. How do some of these challenges that you've seen within the games, how do they relate to the real world, and how might you apply those skills? So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Tristan. And if you have your questions, please go and post them. We have this link here for Slido. So if you go to that link, put in that number, you can go and ask your question, and then we'll try to get to it. But Tristan, I'll pass back to you.
Okay, so to start off, we've got a question from an anonymous user asking if anyone is willing to share how did you get into cybersecurity. Dylan, do you want to start with that one? Like what led you into cyber and eventually CrowdStrike?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll do a quick introduction. I'm Dylan Watson. Like they said, I work at CrowdStrike. I've been working with the Cyber Skyline here for quite some time. And I work on the incident response professional services team at CrowdStrike. So we are responding to active threats, doing digital forensic investigations, and all of that fun stuff. So how did I get into cybersecurity? Coming out of high school, where I did competition robotics through a program called FIRST in high school. And that was my introduction to computer science, to programming, generally the wider world of tech. But I knew going into college that I didn't want to be a software developer, but I wanted to do something in the cybersecurity space. And I was lucky enough to speak with some folks that did digital forensics during my first year of undergrad down at UTSA in San Antonio, Texas. And I got to hear from them about what their job was like, right? Both doing kind of the nitty gritty, hands-on forensic analysis, tracking threat actor movements, what they do through a network, what they do on different hosts, et cetera, but also having to take that and talk about it to a CEO or a CISO, right? And having to talk about the business impact and, handle figuring out different business risks during an active engagement when you have an active threat actor, right? And I found that really appealing, kind of this mesh of technical expertise with interpersonal communication and crisis mitigation and things like that. And so that's what really drew me into cybersecurity. I did a couple of internships in the SOC at my university, which was a great time. I got to learn what internal security looks like, triaging alerts, different projects you run to fix vulnerabilities and things like that. And then pivoted into CrowdStrike. So I'll hand it back over to you, Tristan.
Thank you, Dylan. Connor, do you want to share a little bit on how you got into cyber as well?
Yeah. So for me, it started also in high school. In my, I don't really know if we had a name for it, but as a security club at my high school, we participated in a competition called Cyber Patriot. So back then, I didn't really know what I was doing, but it was the only computer club on campus, and it was super cool, so I went for it. So really started there, and then when I went to college, I was kind of, it's like, yeah, security is interesting. I'll take more a look at this like at some other point, and kind of just went out on a day. And then later on in school, I found the security club at my college campus, and met a whole bunch of smart people there, and really just fell in love with security and really just like deep dive of learning everything I could. And then did NCL through that security club, and now I'm here.
And then lastly, I got into security mainly because I went to a B-sides. I was really into like the programming side of things, and I thought, why not go to a B-sides? And I'm like, hey, breaking stuff is cool too. That's I started like learning more about the security aspects while also still like learning how to build stuff. But if you can do both, it's a lot of fun. Okay, next up, we have a question. Someone is asking, who thought it was a good idea to write a challenge using Rust? I'm not actually complaining. Hard challenges should be hard. So the Rust challenge was written by someone who he occasionally makes some challenges for us. He, if I remember correctly, his inspiration for it was specifically the White House putting something out saying like, "Oh, you should use Rust because memory safety." I think that happened like last year. Dylan, have you seen much malware that's starting to get, or like, have you been starting to see like malware written in Rust and like some of the other newer languages like Golang as they start to gain more traction?
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely have. I can't like name which ones come from which programming languages off the top of my head, but I know we've seen specifically some ransomware variants built in Rust. Specifically because of exactly what you said. It's like memory consumption, right? Obviously, if you're trying to write effective ransomware, that's really important. But yeah, that's why it's important to kind of get this when you're doing reverse engineering or anything like that, static analysis, right? Get this kind of wide breadth of understanding with different programming languages so that you can kind of pivot, because you never know what threat actors are going to be using.
Thank you. Looking at some of the other questions, someone asked, how do I break into professional log analysis? I'm fine with getting flags using Excel, but it doesn't seem scalable for real life. This is actually a perfect question for you, Dylan, given a large part of what CrowdStrike does.
Yeah, absolutely. A large part of my job, probably on any given day, 50% of my job, right, is log analysis. I will say, don't rag on Excel too hard. If your logs are decently formatted and small enough, which even in the real world, a lot of them are, sometimes Excel is the perfect tool. However, obviously, we deal with a lot of kind of weirdly formatted logs or really, really large logs. The two things that I would really focus on, or at least that have helped me, one was learning a scripting language. People will argue all day, right? You'll have people who have been doing this forever that say you should be using Perl for everything, and then newer people that are saying that I want to, script everything out and like compile binaries of Golang. But learn a scripting language, right? For me, that was Python, because Python was, in my opinion, it was easier, right? That and I learned how to do data manipulation, right? Read in a CSV or read in a weird thing and do some regex, right? That's the second thing I would learn, would be regular expression. If you can use regex in CyberChef or put regex into Python, that's going to go a long way. And then the third one for a real professional look is going to be Splunk. Not every organization uses Splunk, but you can set up a free community edition of Splunk. You can chuck some logs into it, right? And if you learn the Splunk query language, I forget what it's called, SPL, whatever. If you learn the Splunk query language and you master that, you will be well set up to pivot to other query languages, right? CrowdStrike just started selling recently something called LogScale baked into something called ngSeam, which is our next generation log analysis platform. And I came in with Splunk background and pivoted over into LogScale. And because I understood the basic functions of Splunk and how the different methods could be used to manipulate data, finding parity with any other tool and learning its query language becomes that much easier.
Thank you for that answer. We have another question for you. I don't know how much of it you can answer because NDAs and stuff, but like, can you tell us in like tiny like abstract details like about like a real world forensic investigation you've gotten to do?
Yeah. Let me. That one's. I'm gonna need to think about that. And so, I think generally, right, as a forensic investigation starts, the first thing we do, the thing that is super important, is scoping. right? When you walk in to something with a client, or if you work in internal security and you walk into something with your boss, right? And they say, okay, something happened. Let's figure out what happened, right? Sometimes people will say, okay, that's enough, go. And what you really have to do is make sure that you're getting the context that you need. What are all of the details? When did this happen? What's the timestamps, right? Start building a timeline. Then look at, right, where did they come from? Where did they go to? And what kind of impact did they have? So something we see a lot of on a lot of our forensic investigations is we can trace a lot of what happens back to a single factor authentication VPN, right? That's huge. And to the point where we start asking, right, do you have multi-factor on your VPN? Just as part of our normal scoping, because that immediately points us in the right direction, right? One really kind of interesting one I worked on was it was a breakout that turned into ransomware that came from a custom web application. It was a custom ASPX app that this company wrote themselves, right? And it had a pretty common CTF-like vulnerability in it, right? I can't remember what it was. It might have been SQLI or something like that, right? Like something that you would expect to see on something like any sort of major CTF. And as you're going through it, you're looking at web access logs. You're looking at, in that case, right, IIS. You're looking at, and then how they pivoted out from that, right? Maybe they were running PowerShell after that or something. And then pivoting through the Active Directory, trying to get DA and then deploy ransomware. And you're going through it, you're like, yeah, all of the individual little pieces of this really do feel like a CTF. I wish I could tell you like a real war story with a real client and exactly what happened. Some of them are really cool, but I can't do that.
Yeah. We understand that. A couple of things that we have some other questions that you kind of adjacently answered, and that some people were asking, do you ever have to analyze multiple logs? But you kind of touched on where you'll have web logs, and then you'll see that the attackers are trying to now move and go after Active Directory. So you're looking at sysmon logs from the domain controller itself, there's a bunch of different logs that you end up having to correlate together to tell a bigger story. And then someone is asking if you have any preferred tools for logs.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on it. So, I mean, if we're talking about top tools, right, it really depends on what we're doing. I'm not going to comment on top tools for static analysis or reverse engineering, because I will be the first to admit that I'm not a reverse engineer. That's not something I do. When I see those on CTFs, I skip them because we have a team of people who are really good at that. It's not something I need for my job because we hand it to them. But for things like log analysis, right, getting really good with a more advanced text editor like VS Code and being able to write regexes in your find and replace, as well as things like CyberChef, right? Getting good, like I said earlier, at a SIEM. Again, my SIEM of choice was Splunk, but I don't care if it's Splunk or ADX or Sentinel or LogScale or whatever, right? Just making sure you have a good understanding of one of those. As well as for disk analysis, it's going to be the Eric Zimmerman tools are going to be fantastic for parsing MFT, user journal. Do they do UAL? I can't remember. Event logs, right? So the Eric Zimmerman suite is going to be great. If you have the capability to use something like Xways or Axiom to look at disk images, then I highly recommend. I'm personally a huge Xways fan. But given that those are expensive, something like Encase or Autopsy is also going to be really good to get to know, right? The individual tools are less important, because any shop that you go to, whether it's internal security or consulting, is going to use a different tech stack. If you, for example, I'll talk about consulting, right? If you go try to work at any of the IR consulting firms, if they own a SIEM, they're probably going to be using that SIEM. If they own an EDR product, they're going to be using that EDR product. Same with a lot of their other internal tools, right? For our forensic collection triage, we have a custom internal proprietary tool. The important bit is learning the underlying forensics, learning how to recognize patterns in logs, and knowing enough of the very common tools that it'll make it easier to pivot.
Very well put. We have someone asking if we're ever going to write a challenge in Fortran. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, so something like that is always a possibility. But in case that wasn't obvious, none of us are experts in Fortran, at least on the Cyber Skyline side. So anything that we would do with that, we would also need to learn. So it's not out of the question, but don't count on it.
We try and keep challenges more relevant to some of the things that you see in modern day. However, there are some old tax stacks still out there today. So I don't want to discount Fortran. You still might run into it. Someone asks, is volatility, for those that don't know, volatility is a memory analysis framework. They're asking, is it a real tool or is it a practical joke invented by DFIR? It, in fact, is a real tool, and when it works, it's great.
Yes.
So someone asks, how do you see artificial intelligence playing a role in cybersecurity, and what are some pros and cons of it? Dylan, have you gotten to see any of that so far?
I have, probably not in the same way that a lot of people on like the media or anything like that are talking about it. And I, by no means, am an artificial intelligence expert, right? I don't work with AI. I'm not like a purveyor of AI, so don't take what I'm saying as gospel or anything on that front. But one of the things I see AI being used for on the defensive side, right, is like more complex analysis. CrowdStrike's Falcon sensor has machine learning baked in to do things like baseline user behavior to look for outlying things that this user maybe wouldn't normally be doing that based on their normal behavior, right? Things that maybe a human wouldn't see. Also using AI to recognize more complex patterns in extremely large data sets we've found useful, right? As well as all the other things that people are using LLMs for, right? Helping with writing queries or programming. I think that AI, also has its uses in cybersecurity education, and things of that nature, right? But I think I would caution people, especially if you're a student, right, learning, not to lean on AI too much, because you really want to make sure you're still coming to understand the concepts. As far as things like threat actors using AI, we've reported on a couple of little things here and there, but I personally haven't experienced anything huge with actual offensive red teaming using AI. That doesn't mean it's not happening. It just means it's not something that I myself have really encountered.
Thank you for that. And real quick, I know a lot of there have been a couple of people in the chat asking about it. We're about to pull up the code for the Spirit Week scavenger hunt. It is right there. We'll leave that up for a little bit so people can get it. This should be being recorded, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. So give everybody a minute or two, get your game code, or the scavenger hunt game code, and then we can get back to answering questions. Someone is asking about the storyline challenge, which for those that don't know, it was a FTP enumeration challenge where you were given an FTP server and you had to get on and like download a bunch of different files off of it. So I don't know. They're also asking if the person who made the challenge is someone who likes to write stories themselves. I don't know. I will have to ask them. That is another member of our team that wrote it. So I will ask them, and we will see if they will get us an answer back during the show. Oh, cool. Jen's in the chat. Jen said that they don't like writing stories, so no. So Dylan, how frequently do you actually like see FTP in the wild anymore?
Not well. It depends on what kind of FTP you're talking about, right? So like FTP publicly exposed to the internet being used as initial access, I'm going to say not a whole lot, right? Something like web app compromise, in my opinion, is going to be a lot more common than that. But once you're inside, right, using FTP or like SFTP over SSH to like transfer files around and to drop things on like random Linux servers that maybe don't have EDR on them, you know, to maintain some sort of persistence, or even on like appliance devices, thinking about hypervisors, thinking about VPNs and firewalls and other things that run Linux or Linux-esque type operating systems using their potential like SSH or FTP to drop files. That I see quite a bit. But publicly exposed FTP, not as much anymore, and thankfully so.
That's very good to hear. So someone's asking about web app exploitation. And then they were completely stuck on the first element or first question. They said they couldn't find it with like inspect element. I don't know which particular web app you are talking about, but I will say, just as a general hint, you need to use a bit more than inspect element when you're doing the web apps. It's very important to use like your browser's dev tools, because you can get traffic graphs and captures. A lot of modern web browsers, you can even like edit and resend in the web browser, something that like normally you would be using like a BERT proxy or something for. Getting familiar with that tool is important. However, you're probably going to need to do more than just look at the HTML. Use like, as Dylan just said, a lot of initial footholds in anymore are like security vulnerabilities in the web app. You need to figure out how to actually find an error in like the backend server code. Then someone is also asking, they said that they have a Windows 11 computer, so they often use VMs for these challenges, and Linux is their go-to. What is the preferred distro of choice for doing security things? My answer to that is whatever you are comfortable in, because at the end of the day, you just need to install your tools. A lot of people really like Kali because it already has a lot of other tools in the repo or just pre-installed onto it. I just use something that's a derivative of Debian, because that's what I know.
I'm just throwing it out there because I'm an Arch fanboy, but Arch is the best. Yep. I don't know. If you really want to get into the weeds of like actually setting most things up on your own, I think Arch is really great for that. If you want to actually learn a lot more about Linux. But if you're just looking for tooling and looking for getting things done, Kali is great. Already has a lot of stuff pre-installed. So I think it's a good starting point.
Dylan, do you end up using any like Linux tools during your work, or is it mostly stuff on like a Windows machine? Or
a lot of what I'm using is stuff on a Windows machine, right? Because a lot of what I'm using are more like enterprise DF apps, talking X-Ways and the easy tools and stuff like that, right? Not to mention, if I'm ever looking at any like weirder AD things and I need to poke at it with like sysinternals or anything like that, right? That's all going to run on a Windows machine. But I do have both a Windows and Linux forensics lab. I personally use RHEL, but that's just because what I got set up with. It doesn't really, like you said, it doesn't really matter. Whatever you're comfortable with, most tools run on most things. Like the other day, I had to like compile some weird binary that needed CentOS. So I'm like, okay, I'll go set up a CentOS VM, right? But most of the Linux stuff I'm doing is either like weirder log analysis or things like that. But I don't find myself using Linux for a ton just because I'm on the blue team side, right? Obviously, if you're red teaming, like you're going to be using Linux all the time.
Yeah.
So one other question that I wanted to answer that's on the same veins with this. Someone's saying my PC uses Windows, which means I can't do a lot of stuff. I don't want to set up entirely new OS or buy a laptop or PC with Linux. What can I do about it? So with a lot of like blue team things like Domo's talked about, it's on Windows. Great thing about Windows in the last couple of years is this thing called WSL. So this is basically the Windows subsystem for Linux, I think is what that stands for. So it's basically just a tiny little Linux VM that runs within Windows. So you don't need to like dual boot anymore. You don't need to run your own VM with an interface or anything. You can start up WSL and have all of the Linux tooling and everything just in a native Windows environment for you. Highly recommend it. I use it on my computer for everything that I want to do. Yes, there is a link in the chat for WSL install. It's pretty straightforward nowadays. It used to be really complicated, but if you don't want a full dive into Linux, I highly recommend that. It's a really cool suite of tools and stuff.
So we have Connor, we have a question aimed at us. They're asking how crazy it gets behind the scenes during the competition weekend on our end. And then they asked, do you guys even sleep?
So yes, it gets very crazy. So while y'all are doing our CTF, we've got our own CTF going on of answering support tickets, like checking in like server stability, and then when y'all get real creative and crash all of our web services, trying to figure out how you guys did that, how to fix it, and push out patches really quick. Do we sleep? Yes, we try to. We are available most of the time. It does get crazy for us, but it's worth it because running NCL and doing this for everyone is a lot of fun for us. So I really enjoy it, even if we miss out on sleep or anything for the weekend.
It also helps that most of you also all have to sleep as well. So so we get some sleep. Okay, I actually can answer this question because someone's talking about being stuck on an M1 Mac and how do you run any of the x86 things. The answer is, yeah, it kind of sucks. You are able to do like emulation with Qemu. There's a tool called UTM that's like the most polished like Qemu front end for like Apple Silicon devices. It will be slow, but you can run the thing. Something that like I've kind of resorted to is I have like I do some like home server stuff, and like I have like I think I bought it for like $60, like an old HP mini PC that I just like can spin up some like little Linux dev environments that are x86 64 and like SSH into. It's definitely tricky. You're also allowed to use like free tier AWS like EC2 instances. You cannot pay for them, but there are free tier instances that you could use to do some of the competition stuff.
So to piggyback off that question a little bit, something that I'm also curious about is a question for Dylan here. With the rise of like the M1 Max and like other ARM processors, are you starting to see a lot more like malware specifically targeting ARM computers, or like how's that looking in the real world now?
I don't have an answer to that actually. I personally have not seen an uptick in that. Again, doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but this is actually kind of the first time I've even really thought about that, because I haven't seen a huge like anything specifically targeting ARM computers. No, I wish I had a better answer for that.
Yeah, the last thing I will say about the ARM stuff is, yeah, it can be annoying, but the battery life is worth it, and that's it. Moving on to the next thing, someone asked if we play test the challenges before we put them up in the competition. Yes, we do. By no means are we going to catch every little thing wrong with it. The player base is really, really good at figuring out unintended solutions that we had to challenges. But yeah, we try and do like QA and play test them beforehand to like make sure that we're putting out something that's pretty good and that people are going to enjoy it and that it works. Someone asked, speaking of AI, since it's officially sanctioned for the challenges now, have you tried testing an agent? I'm assuming like by agent, they mean like a chat, like an LLM model of some kind, be it like ChatGPT or like one of the other open source LLMs that are out there. We have done it on a couple of them. Like it's kind of hit or miss. Like it's pretty cool what it can do, but there are certain things that it just can't quite get. Which is again, I know Dylan said like be wary of like when you're using AI tools. LLMs like are really good at what they're doing, but at the end of the day, they're just kind of like trying to put together what they think the answer should be. Go to real sources.
Damn. And like for me, a thing with LLMs and like AI chatbots and things of if you're using them for CTFs, I think using them as a sort of Google search for things that you want to look for is better than just pasting the whole thing in and telling it to solve it for me. Because at the end of the day, you're doing the CTF to, or at least I hope, you're doing a CTF to try to learn and expand your knowledge base. And if you're just pasting something in and hoping it gives you the flag and just moving on with your day, then at the end of the day, that's up to you if that's what you want to do. But I think CTFs in security world is really about learning and like trying to open and broaden your horizons of what you can learn and push forward. So it's up to you, but I'd hope people aren't just like blindly posting things in and solving it and moving on.
Yeah, and I'll add that being able to kind of really make sure you understand exactly how you got the answer you got is really important when it comes to the working world. So when I'm on the phone with my project manager, with my leadership, or with my clients, if I tell them, hey, the threat actor did this, a lot of times, especially with clients, you're going to get pushback, right? They're not going to say, oh, okay, the threat actor did that. They're going to say, how? They're going to say, why did they do that? And they're going to say, can you show me where they did that? Right. And when you have a CISO who hasn't looked at a log in 15 years, ask you, can you show me where they did that? And you have to walk them through this log, or you had to like script something out to carve something, or, you know, whatever. And he says, okay, can you give me an example of how that works? You have to be able to know it well enough to explain it and fully be able to teach it. Right. Or if I say something that just seems a little off, it's like, you know, my leadership is like, I've never seen that work that way before. Are you sure? Can you walk me through? You got to that conclusion, right? And so that's why, like, yes, AI, fantastic resource, but you need to make sure you understand everything you get out of it.
TV asks, what resources do you recommend for text to quickly learn new scripting languages? Do we really have to take combinatorics and discrete math? No, you don't. It really depends on like what language do you want to learn, because there's like different resources for different ones. Like PowerShell, there's like PowerShell to 100 lunches or something was something that like someone always recommended for learning PowerShell. If you want to learn Python, there is a whole bunch of books and like videos on it. Personally, what I would recommend is, what medium do you learn best from? Do you like physical books? Do you like watching videos? Blog posts are really great. I personally prefer to, at least for like learning programming languages, I prefer reading text, be it in a blog or a book. Normally a blog, because then like you can do copy paste stuff. You don't want to rely too heavily on copy pasting. But once you like learn simple control flow concepts, it's not that hard. You don't need to know any discrete mathematics.
Yeah. I mean, I will say it depends what you're doing with discrete math. There are some fields in computer science, maybe not specifically with security, but there are some fields in computer science that will use discrete math and those like logic puzzles and things. So don't completely discount it. It's still a fun class. It's hard, but I don't think it's worth just blowing it off. It's still something to learn.
Yeah, and to clarify, I didn't want to seem like I'm just pushing it away. Just don't feel like to write some basic scripts, like you need to like learn a whole bunch of things. Just like the best thing I can tell you is just kind of like go pick whatever language you're interested in, pick some resources, and just start learning.
Yeah, and I'll also say like starting with some sort of walkthrough, Code Academy, W3 Schools, whatever you want to use, any of those that you can find with like a 5-minute Google search is good, and getting the basics under you is good, right? Make sure you have a good understanding of conditionals, of loops, of, you know, how to open files, and, you know, those kind of your core things. But once you have a pretty concrete understanding of what I would say to be the basic or beginning of intermediary levels of programming, my preferred method is always pick a project. Pick something you want to do. If it sounds too ambitious, that's fine. You can like learn some stuff from it, quit it, and go to something easier. Like, because it's just a project for you. But pick something you want to learn how to do, and then look at the things necessary to do it. I find for me, right, I'm very goal-oriented, goal-driven person. And so if you put me in front of all of Code Academy and say, okay, learn Python, I'm going to get halfway through and go, man, I'm bored, right? But if I say, okay, I want to build this game, or I want to, you know, I have this like weird log that I have from a CTF I did 3 years ago, I want to parse it and get it into a better format, then that goal, I will look up the things I need to know to get there, right? And that goes for programming, that goes for forensics, right? I am by no means an expert in every single thing about how all of NTFS in Windows works, or, you know, all of the like how Linux processes work, right? But I learn what I need to learn for the job that I'm doing. And I think that that's a really important skill to have.
Okay, we have a few more questions to get to, and then looks like it's kind of calmed down for the night. The top question right now is what caused the individual game servers to go down? And the answer is our database was not having a good day.
Yeah. So, like TLDR, the database for the first time ever, we have silver linings a little bit. It's up and down. We had the most amount of people ever compete in the CTF at the same time this time around, and we had not anticipated that kind of activity, and we had not stress test our own stuff at that type of level. And so the DB wasn't happy and was absolutely being overloaded. And the reason why it was down for so long is we were migrating and scaling up the database, and that just took forever. Is mainly why it was down for so long. So we're sorry about that. Team game went a lot smoother, and we're going to continue to keep things more stable as we go forward, knowing what can happen now.
Okay. Trying to like get through these as quick as I can, because we're all. Someone's asking, they really want to go to college and do cyber after, but some days they feel like pure computer science is going to be a drag. And they also ask, are there any courses of study to peek at? I personally really enjoy pure computer science. Yeah, there's like certain like data structures and algorithms can get like a little boring and mathy. It's important to understand, but you also learn things like systems fundamentals, how memory works, and things of that nature, which are important in security. Yeah. Even if it's not something you're doing with your day job, at least kind of like understanding roughly how a file system works and how memory works is going to be important. You don't need to be able to write your own. You just need to understand like rough ideas of how it works.
Yeah. And I also just want to touch on the other part of that of if you decide not to go pure CS, there is a lot of times programs that will be labeled as like information technology or computer information systems or things like that, where it's a lot more CS and then business and management focused. That still covers a lot of the fundamentals of programming and system knowledges, but also brings in a lot of like management and other things like that. So if that's something that you're more interested in, I still highly recommend that. I have some friends that went through that program at the college that I went to, and they're very successful. So if that path is right for you, then I highly recommend looking into that too.
Someone's asking if we ever see any like interaction / interface between the cybersecurity and maker computers. There's always been that. the DIY electronics crowd and those people tend to be like the same kind of like people that want to like break things. Like hackers started because of people that were like messing around with toy trains, I believe. So like it's always been like those two communities have always been kind of similar. And then lastly, for tonight, someone is asking what certs would you recommend Dylan, like after they have their degree, what certs should they like look into getting?
Yeah, I'll definitely give my opinion on that. My opinion is not, you know, the end all be all, because there's a lot of different certs. A lot of them are good. And a lot of it depends on what route you're going to take, right? Obviously, the CompTIAs are going to be a gold standard for kind of getting your foot in the door with certs. That's going to be your Net Plus and your Sec Plus, Network Plus and Security Plus, right? I would do those. Or if you want to go straight to Security Plus and skip Net Plus, you can do that too. But having Security Plus definitely gets your foot in the door with certificates. After that, I think it really depends on what you want to focus on, right? For example, if you want to go into offensive security, CEH is always good. OSCP, while hard and pretty expensive, is great. I've also personally been hearing really great things about Hack the Boxes cert, which I think is new-ish. Yeah, somebody said ISC2CC. It's free right now. I don't even know what that cert is. But there's a lot of great certs out there, right? On the defensive side, something that is getting really big right now is cloud. I'll go on a bit of a cloud tangent for a few minutes, right? We have seen in our global threat report this year, we talked about how, which any of you can go download, by the way, it's on the CrowdStrike website. On our global threat report, we talked about how cloud cases have skyrocketed over the past few years. Almost every case we get now has some sort of cloud component. And so if you are interested at all in Azure or AWS or GCP or Oracle protection in cloud, right, there's a bunch of certs, both by third parties as well as by the vendors, Microsoft and Amazon and all of them. Yeah, those are really the ones that I see the most of. Once you have a little bit more experience, then you can start talking about things like CISSP. But those are the ones that I hear the most about. Tristan, Connor, I know y'all working a little bit more in kind of the educational cyberspace probably than I do. I don't know if you have any other inputs on certs.
Yeah, so I haven't done them specifically, but I'll back up a little bit. So I personally, when I went through, when I was looking for jobs, I went and got my Security Plus, and then I got a couple of certs from Splunk to originally when I was going for a cybersecurity role. Specific tooling for SIMs and other things like that often have their own certs. So if you're looking to get into something very specific, a lot of the times, like Dylan was talking about, those vendors have their own certs. So if you're going to a company that uses Splunk, get a couple of Splunk certs. There are a couple of them that are free. You don't have to pay for. You just go take a class, go through their labs, and they'll like give you a cert to just prove that you know what you're talking about. And that will go a long way, I think, with a lot of companies that are specifically using those tooling. But to get back on topic with cloud, I have a friend that is like career transitioning right now. It is going through the GCP, so the Google Cloud Platforms, specific security certs. And he's giving them rave reviews. So anything like the Amazon or Google certs, I think, are very broad and very good. So I think they're worth looking into, other than just the standard like starting off with CompTIA.
I have a bit of like a cop-out answer for it, but like look at the job you want to do and look at some of the postings. What certs are they asking for? That's probably where you want to spend your money and time to get certs. Because different jobs are going to be looking for different certs.
And I'll even add on as a pro tip, if you go look at the other people that work at that company on LinkedIn around kind of the same type of position, and they all have one particular cert, might be worth thinking about.
Okay, it looks like we have one last question for the night, and someone's saying, like, can we talk about like the mentality, like, and mindset of like the NCL winners and like cybersecurity superstars in general? I know nothing about that mindset.
Um,
So
so my opinion on this is the desire to learn and to have fun doing what you're doing while you're learning. Because when I was doing NCL, the team that I was on actually won the team game. And our team consisted of people that just genuinely enjoyed learning about stuff when it comes to like logs and security and stuff, where like we get a one of the things that really stumped us was a binary that was obfuscated. So just very basic TLDR. There's assembly instructions. One of them is MOV. And so that instruction is Turing complete, which means it can do everything essentially at a high level. And so that binary was completely nothing but MOVs. And so instead of a lot of people might just getting frustrated and not knowing where to go because that won't decompile. That will not do anything. Instead of being frustrated that you can't solve that, you now spend the entire weekend learning and researching and learning so much about how this works, how that functions, how might you go about reversing that, and the actual functions and learning deeper diving into things and just being excited that you're now spending a weekend learning something rather than just being frustrated that you can't even know where to begin for something. So for me, I think it's just being excited to learn is like just the biggest mentality thing to have when it comes to like trying to do well at CTFs.
as well as you'll notice a lot of the people who like get known in industry, a lot of them just want to give back. So that's another important thing is one, being passionate about learning, and then sharing your passion with learning with other people and trying to help them learn as well.
Yep, I agree. And along hand in hand with that, I think goes the collaborative mindset, right? I understand you have a team game on NCL and you have an individual game, and the individual game should be done individually, right? But in the real world, I'm not doing anything individually, right? Sure, I get a task and I work on that task and I go head down on it, and I, you know, if I can't figure it out, I research it for a while and try my best. But if there's something and I'm like, man, I am stumped, and my options are stay up all night and figure it out, or hit up somebody else and have them brain trust it with me, I will hit up somebody else every single time, because any place you work in cybersecurity should foster a collaborative mindset. You should be working with each other, learning from each other, leaning on each other, right? CrowdStrike's incident response team is fully remote, right? We all work remote. We're dispersed across the country and across the world. And so we have this habit of, you know, someone says something like, hey, I can't really figure this out. And somebody just spins up a Zoom call, right? And we go sit there. We might sit there for an hour. We might sit there on the Zoom bridge for 6 hours, but we're going to sit there until we figure it out together, right? If you are ever in a position where you feel like you can't do that, then something needs to change, because that is absolutely the culture that this industry demands for success.
One of the most important lessons I learned from a B-Sides was pizza does a lot of good work. Be nice to your peers around you, and they'll be willing to help you, and then be willing to help your peers is also important.
Yep.
I think that's all. I want to thank you for joining us tonight, Dylan. It's always great having you on here and getting your perspective.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you all for having me. Hopefully I'll see you at some conferences or something.
We do go to DEF CON every year.
You know, I'll hope to be there this year. I'll be at ShmooCon for the very last one in January. So I'll be at a few of them.
But
all right. Well, I think that's it. Also, just as a reminder in the chat, also the NCL award ceremony is tomorrow at 7 Eastern. There is a link to that, and also in the Discord announcements to go and register for that. All right.